What if everything you thought you knew about leadership was built on outdated systems designed to keep people out rather than bringing them in? Well, in this episode, we're going to sit down with Shoshana Allice to talk about decolonizing leadership, unlearning harmful narratives, and embracing true belonging. We dive into why fitting in isn't the same as belonging, how rest is an act of resistance, and why curiosity is the key to real change. This conversation goes deep, is fully eye-opening, and one you won't want to miss. Stay tuned. Hi there. Welcome to the Empowered and Embodied show. I'm Kim Romaine.
And I'm Louise Neal. We're two transformational coaches who are also fellow travelers on the path of growth and self-discovery. And we're inviting you along for the ride.
That's right. We're right here in the trenches with you, navigating the ups and downs of life. And each week we'll be sharing our own experiences, bringing you conversations with amazing guests, and exploring insights and strategies that have helped us find more clarity, confidence, and ease in our lives.
And trust us, we do not have it all figured out. We're learning and growing right alongside you.
So if you're ready to rise above the chaos, doubt, and confusion that sometimes life throws our way,
and step into a more empowered and embodied version of yourself,
then you're in the right place. Let's get started. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Empowered and Embodied show. I am one of your co-hosts, Kim Romaine, joined as always by my other co-host.
That's me, Louise Neal. I sometimes say Louise. I sometimes say Louise Neal. Anyway,
I was going to say, did you forget your last name?
No, I was like, how do I introduce myself? It's like, folks know who I am, but maybe not. Maybe this is your first time, and you don't know. But yes, I'm the other co-host. And we have a great guest today.
Thank you for having me. I'm Shoshana. And like you, sometimes I include my last name, and other times I feel like my first name is long enough that who needs a last name?
Beautiful. I love that. So my daughter's middle name is Rose, and in Hebrew, Shoshana. And she always wanted to go by Shoshana. And I said, well, that could be your stage name because it's a beautiful name, right? Her first name is also gorgeous. It's Isadora. I mean, come on.
Right? What a beautiful pair of names. Yeah. You did right by your kiddo.
Thank you. Isadora Shoshana got a little bit much, though, so we went with Rose.
I can appreciate that. My middle name is... I know it is Leah. It's Lea. My parents have said it might have been Leah, and I'm not sure where the disconnect is, and I have this sneaking, uncomfortable sensation that it may have gone from Leah to Leia in my own head right about the years of Star Wars.
That's okay.
I may have been a little obsessed at that young age with do you remember the cinnamon bun hair?
Cinnamon buns, yeah, for sure. But here's the thing, like, it's your identity.
Yeah.
If you want to identify as Leia, then I'll be it, right? I dropped my last name for not Romaine. Romaine is my married last name, and I love it, and I'm happy with it, and it feels definitely my identity now. Yeah. But I dropped my maiden last name after I divorced my first husband. I had his last name, and I didn't want to go back to my maiden name because that felt I felt very controlled by that name. And so I went with Kimberly Ray because my middle name is Rae Ray. And I'm like, well, that's a good last name too. So
yeah.
Names. All right. I digress. Let's pop into what we start our week with on all of these episodes. What are we celebrating? Beyond our names, what are we celebrating?
Are you asking me to go first?
You can go first if you'd like. Yeah, there was like, who wants to do this?
Really glad that I listened to the show often enough to know that that's how you open, because it gave me a chance to prepare for the question. And that was a really interesting moment for me this week, was like, oh, I have to really think about what I'm celebrating. It was a bit of a reminder to me that I need to make that a practice more often. And so in the world that we have right now, one of the things that I'm celebrating today is that I still live in a city where my wife and I can hold hands on the street, where we're going to go away for the weekend together, and I'm not worried about our safety. And yeah, so that's a big celebration for me this week. And the other one that's maybe smaller and bigger at the same time is that I managed to get to the pool 3 times in the last 2 weeks, and doing those kind of things to take care of myself has been a real struggle for a long time. And so that I'm celebrating that I'm making real progress on that one.
I feel those both deeply. Thank you for sharing those with us.
Yeah. It is a practice, right? Like taking the time to just pause for a moment, get out of our heads, get out of like all of the vortex of noise that can swallow us whole, and say, okay, what does my life right now, what does that mean? Where can I grab onto those things that are extremely valuable? And the size doesn't matter. Big, small, right? Like impact, like it all adds up when we celebrate. And that's why we do it. So yeah. I'm celebrating. I said I wasn't going to celebrate this. I'm celebrating age. See how that came out? Okay. Didn't even want
You
to come out of my
sounded
mouth.
much older with it.
I've been on this journey for the last while, especially this last few months, about like really understanding the mindset that we have about our age, like the days that are behind us and the days that are ahead of us or not ahead of us. As we get to middle age, it starts to feel really crunchy. And so I want to practice celebrating that I am like, yeah, like here I am at 53 feeling fantastic, and I'm celebrating all of those things that go into that. And this week has been a challenge when I have some health issues or I'm not feeling great in my body all the time. I do wake up and I feel really old sometimes when it aches and it hurts. And it's like, yeah, that's okay. It's just temporary. It's not forever. But I'm celebrating. Maybe I'm not quite there, but I'm celebrating the shift that is happening to me and in my mindset. Yeah, that's what I got going on.
I totally thought it was a different word.
Oh, the shit! You thought I was gonna say the shit that's going on. There's some shit too, but this is celebrations, not the opposite.
I knew there was a question I forgot to ask before we hit record, and it was about whether it was okay to cuss in the show.
Oh, yeah.
I now have my answer. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, no, bring all of you. Yes, 100%. Yeah.
What are you celebrating?
Me? What am I celebrating? I'm celebrating questions. I'm celebrating the power of questions. I met with my writing mentor, my writing coach earlier today, and I came in and I was like, so we can talk about what I'm writing, but I really want to talk about what the fuck is happening when I'm writing, because what's happening when I'm writing is a process that I'm not loving. It's leaving me feeling things that I don't want to feel. But in speaking with him, it's like, yeah, where you are in the process, I get why you're feeling that. I get why the process is looking this way. And oh, by the way, let's experiment, let's explore, right? Just like we do all the time, with in what ways can this process be adjusted so that it is serving you? And that was really powerful for me was to be able to lean into understanding that, it's not always going to take this long. No, I'm not always going to have this feeling. And yes, I will probably have some of these other feelings. Like, one of the things was, in my process, I definitely do better writing longhand, writing, pen on paper. There's just a more natural flow for me. So writing that, and I've embraced that, but moving that from the handwritten word into the computer, where I know there's going to be some editing, and that's fine. The minute I sit down, it's as though there's a cacophony of sound. There's too many voices. It's not just mine anymore, like what I have when I'm sitting down with my candle and my tea and my pen. And I realized that is, right? I mean, I talk about human design, and I talk about my open head and my open ajna. And I realized that what's happening is, because I'm literally plugged into the world, even though all the tabs are closed, except for what I'm working on. It's one of the rare times all the tabs are closed, except for what I'm working on. I'm still siphoning in the energy of everything that my computer is connected to. And so I'm going to be getting these downloads while I'm just trying to edit the piece that I'm working on. And so right before we started, we were talking about, I'm holding onto a piece of selenite right now. And it's because I need that clarity of thought, because I've realized that so much of my time is spent right in front of a computer screen, attached to the world through the computer. And so asking that question of, why am I getting these downloads? Why is this process feeling so long and so arduous and so heavy? And having somebody say, yeah, that's where you are in the process, and it's okay, right? To regulate my nervous system. I'm like, ooh. So to me, that comes back to the power of a question, is just being curious about, instead of throwing something out completely and saying, oh, this isn't working, I don't like this, I'm not going to do this, bleh, right? Actually sitting with it and saying, okay, how do I find the comfort? How do I find, like for me, how do I find the ease? And how can I be curious about what's happening when I may not be able to stop what's happening, right? That constant download. So, yeah. So that's what I'm celebrating this week. It's a place, it's a space. It's a whole lot of shit, is what it is. Right? I'm going to say it.
So I'm curious. I have a question. I know we got like things to do and get on with the show.
Okay, but whatever. It's part of the conversation.
So I thought, you tell me, I thought that writing was supposed to make you feel something. Like, I thought that's the point of writing, like to feel something.
Yeah. I don't want to feel something about I don't want to feel something about the process of writing while I'm writing and processing what I'm writing. So
very meta.
We don't use that word right now.
Oh, sorry. Can we reclaim it?
We can reclaim it. Maybe. I'm not there yet.
That and the letter X we need to reclaim, or what?
There's a whole lot of shit we need to reclaim right now. So the process of, so when we're writing, and we're not quote unquote supposed to feel anything, but the experience of writing can absolutely elicit an experience, right? Sensations, feelings, emotions as we're going through it. I'm fine with that. Those are groovy. I dig that. I'm apparently in the 1970s right now. That was weird. But totally good with that. It's that I'm feeling feels about the process of writing. So I'm feeling something about, why is this taking me 2.5 hours to write 500 words? Like, that shouldn't take that long, right? The should. So
I'm hearing judgment in there.
Right. Well, and it's the, because, and for me, this great session, I'm going to send you both money. Because I was always told, Kim, you're such a great writer. Oh, I love your writing. I love your writing, Kim. And so right now that I'm writing, or I'm working on writing, and this is why I'm working with a mentor, I'm working on improving my writing, but improving it in a certain way. And want to unlearn old habits and want to learn new habits. And in that process, yeah, those judgments, that growth space comes in again, where it's like, wait, I thought I was good at this. Why is this hard? And part of what I'm recognizing is hard is how I've shifted from being very focused on the thing that I'm creating versus being somebody who lives in more openness in general. And when I'm living in that openness, energetic openness, it is a harder space for me to focus, plus perimenopause, right? Or menopause, or wherever I am in the cycle. Like, we're going to add that in as well. Plus, right, cognitive overload, plus, right, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So that to answer
Right.
answer the, yeah, did that go where you wanted it to go? I don't know.
It went where
Cool.
it needed to
I
go.
hope it was interesting for listeners.
All right. So
before we digress any further, I really want to let people know about Shoshana, okay?
Right.
Beyond her beautiful name,
right.
let's let the world know a little bit about Shoshana. So Shoshana is a neuro-inclusive, I can't even say words today. I'm so sorry. Shoshana is a neuro-inclusive leadership coach and consultant dedicated to decolonizing leadership and fostering diverse, equitable, and inclusive spaces. She excels in facilitating courageous conversations that dismantle barriers to genuine belonging. Shoshana holds a master's degree in human systems intervention from Concordia University, is an ICF professional certified coach, and a certified Dare to Lead facilitator. She is a disabled, neurodiverse, queer fat settler living on stolen Musqueam lands. And you're going to tell us a little bit more about those lands as well, I know. She believes the only viable pathway forward for humanity is through connection and interdependence. She is committed to working together for our collective liberation. And she included a quote from Lila Watson in her bio that says, "If you have come here to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you have come here because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together." And I absolutely love that quote. We use it on a regular basis in our home and in our work as well. So beautiful.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I know, right? Feel all the chills. Feel them all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I sent it to you, and I still I can feel the emotion in my chest and the chills at that quote. And it just feels, I mean, I think it's always been true, but it feels true in sharp relief to what is happening in the world around us right now.
Yep.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah. We were talking a little bit before we clicked play around how Kim and I knew where you were from in Canada by the ancestral name of the land that you live on. And I thought that was so beautiful. It's something very new to me, but yet so beautiful. Tell me a little bit about how important that is to, you've included it in your bio, but you included it in a lot of things. Decolonizing.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think there's a movement across Canada. I have no idea what they're doing south of the border, and whatever they were doing is probably changing. But to acknowledge the lands that we're living on, but the part of Turtle Island that we call British Columbia is unique in Canada because it's all unceded territory. Other parts of this country have treaties. And so for me, I just have this awareness around the country of Canada has broken lots of those treaties. We have all kinds of sketchy parts of our history. And in this part, the First Nations that have been stewarding this land since long before all us settlers came here and brought fabulous things like so-called civilization and smallpox, they've been stewarding this land, and we're uninvited guests. So I'm living on stolen land. And so I don't know what it's like in the other provinces, but I know BC First Nations have a really, like, they're a force to be reckoned with in this province. And I say that with like such admiration and respect. And so I think things like land acknowledgments are a lot more common here. They're really like, there's on some level, there's an expectation. If you're going to open a conference, you open with a land acknowledgement. If you're opening a meeting, you open with a land acknowledgement. And for me, part of it for me is making sure I don't ever forget, because a land acknowledgement can become this rote thing that you just do. And so I'm always making an effort, like if I'm delivering a program and it's not right where I'm used to being, whose lands am I on now? How do I pronounce these territories? So I'm in what we know as East Vancouver, which is, my understanding is specifically Musqueam lands. But usually this general part of Vancouver and area are referred to as Coast Salish lands, Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh. And so, yeah, it's been a learning journey. I'm a white settler. My kiddo is Métis Cree from, as far as we can track through his dad's line, somewhere in Alberta. And so that's part of my connection to that as well.
Yeah, so it's unceded here as well. So I am in the unceded territory of Kanien'kehá:ka on the colonially known island of Montreal. Yeah, and I am a U.S. citizen. So coming from the States and coming here and having this be part of the language that we're stepping into, and our daughter is now in Sec 3, in 9th grade, Sec 3, and it has become part of everything she knows.
Mm-hmm.
And yet when we go to anything or attend anything or talk to people in the States, and this becomes like something that we share, they're like, wow,
Mm-hmm.
everybody in Canada must be really tuned into that. And I'm like, we're working on it. And I will say, after spending a little bit of time in BC, it's a very different feel than
Mm-hmm.
in Ontario or in Quebec, or even in the Atlantic provinces. Each province, it feels a little different. I don't know, Louise, what's been your experience with that as well?
Well, yeah. And so I actually am here on Treaty 1 territory. So the very first, right? For me as a settler to understand what that is and how it has been broken and how it has devastated people here has been really, really interesting. I also take really, like, I'm very proud actually to be here, to say that I call this my home, because of not the fact that we've got it all worked out, but the fact that we are talking about it in a way that is bringing forth just more of like what has happened. So I'm also very proud to be like, this is the home of the Métis, right? Like that, it gives me shivers just to talk about that. And then I'm super proud that of the Premier of Manitoba, and being Indigenous and really bringing that forward to say, like, how do we all live together in a new way that we never have imagined, that we never got a chance to do before, right? Because we didn't. And so how do we all figure this thing out? We're all trying to do it. And I think it's a really amazing time to be Canadian, for sure, to figure out who we are. I mean, our identity is being tested all over the place these days. And I think it's really interesting to do it in partnership without forgetting like the trauma that has happened before. How do we heal from that and move forward? But yeah.
So I would love to know, like, how Shoshana, how are you utilizing what we've just been talking about in the work that you're doing, right? I use the words decolonizing leadership. And while I think I have a pretty clear understanding of that with the work that I do, I'd love for you to share a little bit of like, because I know when I read it, the bio, Louise was like, those are cool terms.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting for me. So that phrase, that concept, that idea came into focus for me two and a half something years ago. I went looking, like, what does decolonizing mean? Especially in a province where our BC First Nations are such a powerful vocal force. Like, is this a term that's specific to First Nations, to Indigenous issues and reconciliation? And the answer that I found was yes and no. It includes it, but it's not limited to it. Everything, fish don't know the water they're swimming in, right? And so if I track that metaphor into being human, the water that we're swimming in is colonial. It's shaped by late stage capitalism. It's white supremacist. It's patriarchal, misogynist, homophobic, fatphobic. I'm sure I've missed a bunch, heterosexist, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? Like ableist for sure. And all of these, like, they're all interconnected. And they come from power over. They come from outdated human hardware that is still programmed for in-group and out-group, that is stuck in scarcity, joy, resources, all the things. They're all like a pie. If I don't steal your piece, I won't have enough to eat. And because I've been doing leadership development for 20 some years, and most at that time when this came into focus, most recently within an Indigenous context, I was looking at, so what do we believe about leadership? Where do those beliefs come from? Most of the frameworks, do a little YouTube search sometime and look for any of the common leadership concepts and to find somebody speaking on them. And what you will find are white men talking and the very occasional white woman, mostly Brene Brown, and very little else. And yet there are some amazing leaders and thinkers who are Black and brown and many other, descriptors, but finding them in the YouTube algorithms is almost a non-starter. And so what if we start to look at leadership and rethink it and start to peel back the layers of how we do leadership and look at, do we want to do leadership this way? Are we doing leadership this way because it's actually the best way to do it? Are we doing leadership this way because it comes from all of that programming at an unconscious level? And so it hasn't changed. In a lot of ways, it hasn't changed what I do. I'm a leadership coach. I teach people how to have hard conversations. I facilitate Brené's work on courage building. What it's changed is how I do it. And it's much more, it's like that subversive entry point to having conversations about intersectionality and privilege and humanity and how we can lift each other up and acknowledge where systemically it's just harder for some folks. When we talk about courage and have you ever been in one of those in a facilitated thing and somebody says, this is a safe space?
I can't stand that term. I'll be really, I do talk about my spaces as being brave spaces. Mm-hmm. Because I cannot confirm whether or not it is a safe space for you.
Exactly. I
hope it is.
And so I really like in my work, I talk with folks about doing our part to create a little more safety, to do what's within our control to make the space as safe as possible. And when we talk about, like, a big part of that work is about taking off the armor, which is what gets in the way of courage. And I won't. I'm never going to tell you to take off your armor. I have no idea how much courage it took for you to get out of bed this morning. If you are a person of color, to go walk in public as a person of color. And for some folks, they're not going to resonate with that. Some folks of color are going to go, what's that white girl talking about? And others are going to go, yeah, like just showing up in spaces as a person of color. You know, a lot of the spaces I'm in, often as one or two in a room full of white folks. I don't get to tell you to take your armor off. I get to help folks in the room understand that our job, especially those of us who are white folks, is to make it as safe as possible for folks to consider softening their armor a little, exploring that possibility, and then not telling anyone what they need to do. So it's all of those layers. That for me is what decolonizing leadership is about, is checking all our assumptions and rethinking them and exploring them and getting curious.
Yeah, it's understanding that we do operate in these systems, right? Like, and it's not just one. There's so many layers of stuff that we carry around with us all the time that we don't even know it, right? That recognition of like armor, I think is fascinating because we often don't even know. Right? We often don't even know how much armor we have or how heavy it is or what that's like, because we've been from birth, right, in so many of these systems. Yeah.
Well, and I think it served us. Like, armor is another way of saying all of the self-protective strategies that we've gathered over the years. And often we gathered them because we needed to keep ourselves safe in some situation or another. And the problem is that then when we don't want to have them, they're habitual. And so sometimes we still need to put them on. There are situations in which being armored up is just the most sensible approach we can take. But we also, my goal is for folks to have more awareness so they can have more choice. Oh, I want to take some of that off here. I want the capacity to connect more deeply. And I can't do that if I've got my full armor on. So how can I take some of it off so that I have more opportunity for connection here?
I just got so excited by what you were saying. Well, I use, right? Because it's, I use same concepts, different language, right? Definitely the language of systems is definitely all over there, but it's this idea that we have created misalignments in our life, that armor, from who we truly are at our core, that we may not ever actually know who that person is because we have created so many misalignments so that we can just show up. Right? And so they don't feel misaligned.
Right.
And yet when we start to soften or start to create space for that armor, for those misalignments to shift, we go, oh yeah, that's not actually in my belief system. That doesn't fit with my ethos. Why do I have that thing? Well, that thing is good, right? It's not like our shadow parts of self are good. They are there for a reason. They have kept us safe to an extent, right? We also don't want to make that assumption that everybody feels safe, because as you pointed to, like, there's a lot of people walking around the world just existing doesn't feel safe. Particularly now, in our lifetimes, particularly now. It's not the only time in history that people have felt that way, right? So if people want to start this journey, whether they're a leader, if they're an individual, if they're a contributor at work, if they're an entrepreneur, whoever they are walking the face of this earth, if they want to start this work of going, I might want to decolonize my own thoughts, decolonize who I am and how I show up, How do you suggest they start that process?
Well, I would say if they're already asking that question, they already have. They've started the process. Because that is, when you shared your celebration at the beginning of the conversation, what flashed through my head was, tell me you're a coach without telling me you're a coach. And because curiosity is the most powerful thing we have. I think whether you're, a senior executive, an individual contributor, a community member, a parent, like wherever you are, if you're willing to bring curiosity to, what do I believe about this? Do I believe my beliefs? Like, is that true? What are the assumptions I'm making here? What are the stories I'm making up? Can I stretch myself into the discomfort of seeing where I have privilege, and that has become such a loaded word, and yet it isn't good or bad because it's systemic. When I was young, I read People of the Pines. It was about the Oka crisis because I grew up in Ontario. And that was my entry point into starting to understand Indigenous issues in Canada. And I spent a number of my teenage years feeling deeply ashamed for being a white person. And at some point, I came to understand that, that didn't serve anything. There's whole bodies of research around shame being inversely correlated with meaningful behavior change and all of those things. But also I didn't choose it. But I do have a responsibility to use the places where I have privilege to see where can I lift up someone else. And also it's okay to acknowledge where I don't. I'm also disabled. There's all kinds of ways in which that makes life really systemically hard. I would say that's the other starting place. One of the other many entry points is, what are all the ways I've internalized limiting beliefs about my own identities? Being disabled in a deeply ableist society is tricky AF. The damage that my internalized ableism has done to me over the years has been exponential. Saying and I've seen that in lots of ways and in lots of layers around my ableism, around my neurodivergence, around being fat in a fat-phobic society that includes the medical community that's invested in quasi-science, So yeah, I think it comes down to curiosity and humility, like that willingness to unlearn.
Yeah. That deep belief that there's another way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I felt a lot of times too is like there's this whole like this pushing energy that we just would push through, right? Just push through it, just do it. Like, let's just do this thing, get to the other side, push. And for many people, sure, it works for a while, right? Depending on who you are, all of those things that can get you through, sort of, kind of. But when you're stuck in the pushing, like, it's like, can we just fucking stop pushing?
Yeah.
Like, just stop. That's not the only way through, right? Trying to fit in, trying to, right? All of these things that we just try so hard. And when it doesn't feel right, guess what? It's not right.
I think that touches on something else that I know, Shoshana, your work is deeply steeped in, which is that sense of belonging, right? I deeply believe that people push and continue to push where that resistance is thick and heavy. And we all here on this, whatever this thing is, Riverside, on this podcast,
This recording,
I don't have words today. We all know that resistance is a sign to slow down, stop, assess, look. Like, we know that. But the average person walking around just wants to fucking fit in. They just want to belong. And
But those things are different.
They are. Yeah. Speak to that.
Yeah.
I mean, belonging is, I feel, so, I mean, we're hardwired for connection. Belonging is like one of the most primal human needs. I mean, we're wired for it from a safety perspective. Go back far enough to our ancestors, and you need to know who your people are and that you're safe in that community. And that way you don't get eaten by the saber-toothed tiger or taken out by the other tribe over there that's, fighting you for the animal that's going to feed your community for the next however many months, right? But there's a whole other rabbit hole there. But I think, belonging is about, I belong here, all of me, my beauty and my mess, my features that folks enjoy and the parts of me that drive everybody nuts, like all of me, just who I am, I belong here. Fitting in is about changing who I am so that I will be accepted into that group. And it requires usually pretzeling on some level. It requires silencing parts of us that are important to us. And it requires hustling, because when we have to change who we are to fit in, we don't ever actually get the feeling of belonging, because there's always this niggle at the back of our shoulders that at some point, this group that we so desperately want to feel belonging with is going to notice that we're not actually like them. They're going to see through it. And it's painful. It's painful.
I think there is that place where that disconnect between fitting in and belonging is also perpetuated, right?
Absolutely.
In all of our systems, in all of our societies, in all of these cultures that we live in here in North America in particular, that you will belong if you do fit in.
And if you don't feel like you fit in and you don't feel like you belong, here, buy this.
Yeah.
You just need these expensive clothes and that nip and tuck and this car and that makeup. Our entire economy would collapse if folks actually stopped hustling for their worth, because we wouldn't need to buy all that shit. But we've been taught that our worth is measured by our productivity, that our belonging is tied to how we look, to how we dress, to what we own, to our net worth, and that all of those things are like, it's such a zero-sum game, because all of those things are also supposed to be within our control, except most of them aren't. Wealth is, right? Like, we don't choose our height. We don't choose what our body was diversity, natural diversity of humans includes diversity of size, height, width. It includes diversity of hair color and eye color. And I don't know that this one's a natural diversity, but our world is systemically created diversity of economic access. And that's very much about what you're born into. Like, the idea that you get from poor to wealthy entirely on your own efforts is a whole other rabbit hole of misinformation.
Well, and I want to throw in there what Louise was talking about at the beginning under celebration, right? Diversity of age.
Yeah.
And going back to this idea of Indigenous teachings and Indigenous wisdom, how we've lost the wisdom of the elder.
Yeah.
And how that is like, right, as a middle-aged white woman, I am not worried about being picked out and persecuted, right? There's privilege in that. I can move freely through the world. I'm not as in danger as I was when I was in my 20s or 30s even, when it was a little bit more dangerous for me to move individually. And then, right, it's more dangerous for my mom at 80 to move through the world again. Like it's this weird thing with age and right, how we present in the world in terms of that gender identity as well. Yeah, I so many different little. We have to have you back because I like want to jump into all these rabbit holes.
I'd love to. My life is a series of rabbit holes and soapboxes. I'm pretty sure of it.
Oh, I love that. Rabbit holes and soapboxes. I think that's the title of a book.
Yeah. Oh, actually, yeah, it would make a great book.
Right?
Well, and I find it so interesting too, is that we come together and here we are in like the mid of our lives, right? Mid career, midlife, whatever, mid something. We're in the middle, and we're supposed to have it figured out, right? We've had decades of life experience and career experience and relationships behind us, and we are supposed to, at this stage in our lives, have it figured out. And it's like, I feel like the opposite of that is true for me. I have become so much more aware of what not only I don't know at this point in my life, but I'm actually becoming more aware of what I do know. When I shed some of those systems, when I shed some of those judgments, when I put some of those things down, but I can only, like, we can only have this conversation amongst us because we're here in the middle. We can't have this knowledge or this wisdom that we have right now and have this conversation when we were 20. Like, no 20-year-old is having this conversation because we have this evolution that we're going through that allows us to be here and to see these systems, to start to see what's going on, to start to see what is I'm going to use the word wrong, but to see what's like not working, what's crunchy. And we get to start to deeply feel these things, I think only because we're here right now, right? That we bring all of this stuff to it. I love having this conversation because I feel like I am like a kid in a candy store sometimes because I'm like, oh yeah, that, and like, what else do you know? Right? Like, tell me more. I love that.
There's something about being middle-aged. Take or leave that phrase. But there, I think I love watching the young people and listening to folks that are younger than us, because I think that we're having to unlearn a lot of shit that we've accumulated over the last 20, 30 years in this world. And blessed, but while things are really scary right now in some ways, there is a quality of conversation and a quality of being that the younger generation has access to that we didn't. I think, I have an 8-year-old and I also have a bonus daughter who is 27. So I have like this direct two very different generations there, and they're having, they have lenses that we couldn't even have imagined when we were those ages.
Yeah. It's funny because listening to Louise, I was thinking, no, sit down and listen to the conversations that my newly minted 15-year-old is having with her friends. And I feel like those conversations and the conversations that I have, and I will say particularly with young Black women who are in their 20s and what they see and how they perceive the world, we need more of that.
Yeah.
And we can learn so much through that. I mean, it is fascinating talking to my teen, and she's like, what do you mean you didn't have these conversations in this language? I said, we were going in the 80s, we went through very much, my group of people went through very much some of the same types of exploration and understanding, particularly around gender norms. There was a lot of that within my group. of people. And we didn't have the language that is available now. And it would have been so, I just imagine what would have happened right over the last 30 years, 40 years. Oh, Jesus, don't even do that to me. That of if we had had that language, but we have it now. And how cool is that? Right. So I think there's that unblending and unlearning that Louise was talking about that is accessible at different entry points, depending on how open we are, how curious we are. Yeah, that's what I'm getting out of this. All right. I want to continue this conversation all day long, and we want to be kind to our listeners. And so, Shoshana, come back and talk to us again. But before we wrap up today, what do we want to underline, highlight, put giant neon signs around and make sure somebody's walking away with from this conversation?
So I'm going to add a resource that we didn't talk about at all, but it is the resource that just came up for me while we were talking. And it is, if you haven't heard of Tricia Hersey and the NAP Ministry and her book, Rest as Resistance, go find it. Because if you want to decolonize, there's a starting point for you, is just reclaiming rest as resistance. So I think that's a piece for me that I would offer out there, and curiosity.
Yeah. Kim, we just talked about that book not that long ago.
We did. I brought that into my group this month. Yeah.
Yeah. I think, what I love, and we kind of started the conversation with this, was the whole idea of water, right? And that we, as a fish, we don't recognize what we're surrounded with until I don't know what happens. Somebody says, "Hey, you're in water," or you have to jump out of the water. I don't really know, but there's this recognition of what is going on around us, and to question that. Do I need to be in water? Maybe I'm not a fish, and maybe I don't do well here. But I love that, just that reminder. There was a video I saw a long time ago about water. This is Water, I think it's called.
I remember.
Do you remember that one?
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. We'll find it and put it in the show notes, because that one absolutely is that whole understanding of who we are and what we're surrounding ourselves with.
Yeah, I think, there's this, Shoshana, you said curiosity. Okay. And I started by saying that I'm celebrating questions. And I don't always. Louise is the questioner. I'm the rebel. She's the questioner. So I don't always celebrate questions. But I think when we're talking about what we're talking about, there very often is a fear that I'm going to get it wrong. I'm going to piss somebody off. I'm going to hurt somebody. And I'm going to tell you right now, yes, you're going to get it wrong. You're going to piss somebody off. And inadvertently, you're going to hurt somebody. And learn from that. And I don't mean that from a, stern parent or stern teacher place, but it gives that opportunity to learn. I mess up all the time, but it's because I'm putting myself in situations to mess up and to learn and to expand and evolve. And so I think allowing that curiosity, those questions to open up that place of fear.
Yeah.
It's okay. It's okay. You're going to. We all are. We are human. We are not here to be perfect. Please don't think we're here to be perfect, because we're not.
Doesn't exist.
No.
Perfect doesn't exist. It's one of the many illusions that we're like hamster in a wheel chasing.
Yeah.
I love what you just said, and I think what I hear in it is this call, along with curiosity, to be kind and gentle, especially with ourselves, and to know when we discover things about ourselves or our beliefs or something that's uncomfortable or out of alignment, or when we discover we have privilege that we never considered, or we don't need to feel badly about it. We don't need to beat ourselves up for it. we need to be gentle and just take a moment and then do the next right thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a whole different conversation, right? That idea of we have privilege, and that's just a fact. And right, you know, I too spent a lot of time rending clothing, sobbing like, oh shit, why am I a white woman? I hate this, blah. And it's like, okay, well, that's not getting you anywhere except for showing up exactly in the world the way you don't want to. So please stop that. That was all internal dialogue. Shoshana, where can people connect with you and learn from you? And what do you want to share with the world?
Yeah. I have a website. There's not a lot on it yet, but I'm hoping by the time this episode airs, I'll have gotten more there. So you can find me at decolonizingleadership.com. And from there, I'll either link you to useful information on the site or to my LinkedIn profile, depending on how much I've accomplished. Thing about being disabled, things move really slowly. But if this conversation was interesting for someone, reach out to me. There will be, if you can get to my website, you'll find a way to reach me. And I love having these conversations, and I love connecting folks to other resources when my capacity is low, and to doing this work when I have the capacity to do it.
Well, we're so glad that you had the capacity to be with us here today to have this conversation. And for sure, we will be having more conversations with you.
Awesome. These conversations feel capacity building for me because they fill me up. I'm so grateful for this. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hope, dear listener, this has been the same experience you've had, that you get a little more full at the end of our time together, because I certainly am. And I know Kim is too. So I want to thank everyone. Take care. Thanks, Shoshana. Bye for now.
Bye for now.
Bye, everyone.
And that's all for this week's episode of the Empowered and Embodied Show. We hope today's episode has sparked something within you. Remember, we're all on this journey together. If something did resonate with you today, why not share it with a friend who might need to hear it too? You can find us everywhere you listen to podcasts. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you're feeling generous, leave a review. Your feedback not only helps others find the show, but also helps us understand what's most valuable to you. Until next time, be kind to yourself, stay curious, and remember, we're walking right alongside you. Thanks for being part of our community.